optics do matter, and you could almost characterize the conflict now as a test of Western resolve versus Russia's ability to keep putting conscripts in front of Ukrainian bullets.
Yes, indeed.
And Putin always banked on the West finally giving up and running out of strategic patience. And so Biden turning up there and saying we're in this for the long haul, as the leader of the Western Bloc, is a very big symbol indeed. And the fact that he went to Kyiv, when I understand the Pentagon and his own Secret Service recommended he didn't, really does just put the cherry on the top of that cake.
That is interesting. I wasn't aware of the idea that the American intelligence community were unhappy about him going to Kyiv. Now, meanwhile, where do we go from here? Because the British Prime Minister has been, as we know, in the Munich Security Conference, calling for the West to double down on support for Ukraine. And by the way, Boris Johnson has been on his feet in the House of Commons in the last few minutes, putting pressure on Rishi Sunak to do more. So I wonder, with all of this talk of giving more support to Kyiv, does any of it make enough, given what's actually happening on the ground? Does it do enough to make a big difference? Or are we heading for something of a standoff, with Russia throwing its men and troops into the front line, into the meat grinder, the way the Russian military does, and Ukraine with strength enough to stand its ground, but not enough to force them out of its territory?
I think the Russian phrase literally translates into something even more sordid. They call it a flesh grinder. My judgment on this is that the Russian political culture, which infects its military culture, is so corrupt and sclerotic that it is almost beyond the Russian military to really learn the lessons and improve the several leagues it needs to at an institutional level. That doesn't mean that those on the front line who've survived won't demonstrate Darwinism and proving that they as individuals can look after themselves. But I can't see the Russian military anytime soon becoming a superb or integrated all-arms force. And when you look at the defence industrial base behind them, I don't see them being able to produce vast quantities of high-tech materiel.
Yes.
So what you end up then is Ukraine, though, is dependent on fighting more cleverly, so that it doesn't suffer the casualties that Russia suffers, 40 million Ukrainians, 140 million Russians. And so what the West does need to provide, and I do think talk of fighter jets and some of the really high-end stuff is a little distracting. What the West needs to provide is some of that precision stuff that has allowed Ukraine to prevail strategically, things like HIMARS, maybe even longer range systems, some of the air defenses that mean that Putin's attempt to smash the critical national infrastructure of Ukraine won't work because those missiles will be swatted out of the sky. Those are the genuinely strategic concerns at the moment. Yeah. So beyond Biden visiting Kyiv, what I would like to see are contracts, not just for putting factories on ammunition factories on 24/7 working, but contracts to build new factories. Because at the moment, even with the Americans expanding from 15,000 to 90,000 shells a month, that only just meets the lowest rate of usage of Ukraine to date.
Yes, it is a grim prospect, though. And what about China, where President Xi is going to be coming up with some sort of plan later this week? We don't know what he's going to say, but it could be detailed. It could be, and this is something which is familiar when it comes to Chinese diplomacy, it could be fairly woolly.
I think it will be fairly woolly, and China, I think, will stick to what it has always said, which is it wants to preserve territorial integrity. It doesn't want to see the use of nuclear weapons or the nuclear power plants put at risk, and it wants peace to return. And it's saying that because of several audiences. It's looking at the global south as well, and it knows that the Brazils, the Indias, etc., will get behind this. Ultimately, it doesn't want to see Russia lose, but it would be quite happy to see Russia weakened and for the status of Russia as very much the junior power to China to be established and for Russia to be slightly dependent on it. But it certainly doesn't want Ukraine to see a stunning victory, and if you like, the West to be triumphant in it now, to be looking after a basket case Russia, or even, I think none of us want to see this, a completely imploded Russia that causes us real problems to sort out. So China has got quite a nuanced position, and it will look woolly, but look at who the messages are really aimed at.